You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast. I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. And today, our guest, the Alligator Program Coordinator. Try saying that 5 times fast. He's Andrew Arnett on the show.
This episode of the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast is brought to you by the Foundation for Mississippi Wildlife, Fisheries, Parks, and Marine.
You're listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast, and I'm your host, Matt Wyatt. We have a relatively new Alligator Program Coordinator here at MDWFP. He's on the show today, Andrew Arnett. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, Matt.
And when I say relatively new, I mean like about a year old.
Yeah, about a year and 3 weeks now.
Yeah. So we'll get into that a little bit, but you're, new to the title of Alligator Program Coordinator at MDWFP. You're not new to wildlife and fisheries here in the state of Mississippi. So kind of take me back to the beginnings of how you started on this career path, Andrew.
Well, in 2012, I had a gentleman that was a full-time employee with the agency at the time named Jeff Mangrum. And me and Jeff got to talking, and I had interned with the agency prior to this. So in 2011, I interned with Chad Maisley up in the East Central region on trim cane and Choctaw WMA and Black Prairie WMA.
Yeah.
And I guess they saw what they liked when they saw my work ethic while I was intern. So at that time, Jeff was over the contractual employees statewide, and he approached me, and I think I was signing paperwork to come on with the agency contractually before I even graduated from Mississippi State.
How about that?
Because he met me at Thompson Hall.
On campus there.
On campus, and I was signing paperwork like a week before graduation.
That's great. Now, the intern part of it, so you're a student.
I was.
And you were interning, at the WMAs. What were you doing as an intern?
I was doing anything that the WMA biologists are doing. We were beaver trapping. We were banding wood ducks, planting food plots. We were managing the WMAs.
Okay.
So I got to be hands-on with the biologist, and it was really fun getting to cut my teeth on the WMA side of things.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned it was someone you knew that was already there. It kind of got you into it, but you obviously had to have had an interest in the outdoors, hunting, fishing, thing as a kid coming up in order to want to go that route.
I did, and that's a real interesting story. So we can start with that.
Yeah.
My great grandfather worked for GP for a living back in the 20s and 30s and 40s. He scaled logs for GP, and in the wintertime for GP, he would do their beaver trapping to keep the water off of the pine timber. And he retired, of course, before I was old enough to really know. And during the summer times, I'd spend the entire summer with him and my grandmother. And he'd row crop farm with an old farm-all tractor that you change the implements out under the tractor. And in the winter times, I'd spend the 2 weeks we get out for Christmas with him, and we'd run trap lines, and my parents would have to beg me to come home Christmas Eve just so I could spend time with the family and open presents. And as soon as I did that, I was back out there with my granddaddy running trap lines. He was a avid turkey hunter, but he didn't do much deer hunting, but my granddaddy did the deer hunting. So I got to do the trap lines with great granddaddy and then deer hunt with my grandfather. I didn't get into the turkey hunting as much, but the deer hunting, that's my passion. Yeah. And so I grew up with a true outdoorsman, in my opinion. And my grandfather was an outdoorsman himself. He worked for Fesco for many years in Starkville, building tree plows and planters and all that stuff.
Yeah. Well, and it sounds like then your reputation sort of preceded you.
It did.
They knew you were kind of what they were looking for there for an intern.
I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know that they, knew about my, upbringing and whatnot, but I guess when they saw my work ethic as a contractual employee, it kind of stuck with them, and that really helped. So I spent 2 years on contract on Nanaway and Okeechobee WMAs. And then in 2014, so almost 10 years this year, it's hard to believe. Time goes by so fast. I think I've gotten a little grayer since then too. But in 2014, I've come on with the agency full-time as a conservation associate biologist. in the East Central region, and ended up my immediate supervisor, Mr. Paul Wyndham, retired, and they pushed me into a acting supervisor role. So I stayed in that role from 14 to 2016, and then I transferred to law enforcement because I always wanted to be a game warden growing up. And I spent from 16 to 19 after graduating the academies in my home county, Winston County. So I got to patrol Winston. I was fortunate enough to get assigned to my home county. Mm. And then, of course, life happens and you marry a woman from somewhere else and you end up down there eventually or where they're from. Yeah. And it worked out. So I spent from 19 to 23 as a floating officer on the Homachita National Forest. Okay. Made some really good cases on the forest.
Yeah.
And then last year I took the position of Alligator Program Leader, May 1st, 2023.
It's a heck of a career path. And anybody that looks at it, Andrew, can't help but notice, background in biology.
That's right.
As a biologist, and then making the transition into law enforcement at one time. What was that transition like for you?
It was really easy because, I grew up hunting and fishing and always wanting to be a game warden. So the transition for me was really easy, but I felt like it gave me a much more well-rounded background to be able to perform those duties as a conservation officer and protect the resources that we love.
Yeah. Did it help that it was an area you were familiar with when you first got into law enforcement, home area?
It did. There's always those that say, oh, you can't work your home county because you know everybody. Nah, you break the law, you break the law. You got to hold everybody to the same standard, even yourself.
Sure. So a year ago, we're almost, 1 year, I guess exactly, of being moved into that role as Alligator Program Coordinator. Easy for me to say, it's a little bit of a tongue twister. But that transition, what has that been like? Because it still involves law enforcement, correct?
Fortunately, I was able to retain my status as a law enforcement officer, and I appreciate that opportunity, no doubt, because I did not want to give that up. It takes too much to earn the privilege to tote a badge and a gun, and it's an honor too. It's a grueling 6 months of training, and it's just not something I ever want to give up. I'm too passionate about it.
What are some of the challenges in that program?
Well, it's a statewide program, so you're over all the you're a one-man show when it comes to that program. You've got all the administrative tasks, all the field work. It can be a challenge, but it's really fun.
So when you say fun, see, somebody would look at some of that field work and think, there's nothing fun about that. When you say field work, describe some of the things that are a part of the Alligator program.
And so I'm fortunate to be assigned an airboat and another big boat. And part of the field duties is I go out and run alligator survey routes on our public water systems, and I monitor nests, across the state. And I do still get out in the field and assist with alligator complaints when I can. Okay. And I'll take care of some in the county I live in when I get an opportunity and a chance to.
Yeah. So complaints generally, like what is it usually typically, hey, it's on my property, or is it showed up in my swimming pool, or like what kind of complaints are we talking about?
A swimming pool complaint would be pretty exigent. So we jump on top of those and, get that out of their swimming pool, of course. But an alligator that shows up in a pond this time of year, most of the time it's a male. They're roaming. It's breeding season. So you give it a couple of days, he might move out. But if it's somebody that really wants it off their place, we'll go help them out. As long as it's not, eating some of their livestock like geese or ducks that they have purchased and put in that pond, we'll go remove that for them and relocate it.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, if it's a relocation thing, the decision-making process about where an alligator is relocated to, how do you figure all that out?
So we relocate it quite a ways from where we capture it. Mm-hmm. You don't want to put it in a a body of water close to where you captured it from, because he might come back. So let's say you catch one here, you don't want to put it in a creek or a river system that's just a couple of miles away. You try to relocate him a good ways away.
Have you had any close calls? I mean,
As in
close calls with an alligator in this year since you've been the program coordinator?
No, I hadn't had any close calls. I do have a memory though when I was a conservation associate biologist. I was working with one of our contractual employees on Okeechobee, and we were trapping beaver in a slough, and it was holding water on a bunch of our hardwood timber on that WMA. So we were trying to trap the beaver out and blow the dam and get that water off of the hardwood so it didn't kill them. And I remember walking behind him that day. We were walking through some thick grass and couldn't see. And we had it in a beaver run, and he turned around and looked at me and he said, "Oh boy." I said, "What?" He said, "We got an alligator in this trap and it's live." And we had it it was a foothold trap. And we had the alligator by the front leg, and we wanted to release the alligator. We didn't want to put it down. Yeah. So I remember we spent 2 or 3 hours building up. We took a hatchet and a saw and cut sticks and just kind of walled off the head section so that he couldn't bump back and catch us with his teeth and his mouth. And we got that foothold trap off his front leg and turned him loose.
Right there. Happy to see him going his way.
Oh, absolutely.
That's great.
It was probably about a 7-8 foot alligator, if I recall.
Big enough.
Oh yeah.
And so, I mean, experiences like that over the years, we go all the way back to when you kind of started as an intern in college, working at a WMA, working as a biologist. It's just that type of experience that you've built up over the years that prepares you for something like this, I guess.
It does. Of course, I've had to learn on the fly too in this position. And it's just kind of like drinking straight from a fire hydrant and not the hose.
Yeah.
But I think I've adapted pretty well to it, and I've made some strides in the program since last year.
So what are your thoughts on where things are right now with the season that the state is able to produce, having, the alligator season and the draw? Where are things right now in your estimations?
Right now it's stable, and I'm going to keep tag numbers as they are right now because I have some things that I would like to do in the future to establish whether we need to up tag numbers or keep them the same, because I don't want us to shoot ourselves in the foot since they're a species kind of like the bear. They take quite some years before they're mature enough to breed. So I don't want us to up tag numbers and then us, detriment the population, so to speak, and then it take a while to recover from it. I don't want to have to pull the reins back after we, let them loose.
Sure.
So I want to make sure the data and the science is there to support the decisions that we make down the road.
So on the analytical side of what you do, data, building that up over the period of time and even those that have come before you collecting all that data, it's really twofold in that, one, it's going to affect the decisions that you make and how you want to go forward. But two, it kind of gives you the confidence that, okay, we've put in our time, we've done the research. Now here's what we need to do going forward.
Yeah. So we would have to go off of, survey route data and habitat data to establish, a rough population estimate. And I don't think, or I know we haven't had one since early 2000s, since the alligator seasons started.
Yeah.
So I would love to get another rough estimate before we go down that road.
Looking back, you think about growing up and the kinds of things that you were involved in as a kid in Louisville in that area. And if we had a time machine and we go back and we run into you as a 14-year-old, 15-year-old, and we said, hey, your future, alligator.
Oh, no, I would have never, I never would have saw myself here.
14-year-old you would be like, no way, that's not ever going to happen. And then here you
No,
are.
I never dreamed I'd be sitting here in front of you doing a podcast either.
Yeah. It's funny how life works, isn't it?
It is.
As a lifelong Mississippian too, I mean, I can say whatever I want to say about MDWFP or about the state and its people, but I moved here at 18 years old. You've been here your whole life. What is it about Mississippi that is such a cool place, a great place for the outdoorsman to be?
Well, I wasn't here my whole life. My parents, when they graduated from pharmacy school and nursing school, they started out in Alabama. So I was born in Alabama.
Okay.
Not everybody knows that. And so I'm the oldest of 5. There's a set of triplets under me, and then 16 months after the triplets, there's another one. So I'm the oldest of 5, and I'm not quite sure. It was either 5 or 6 that my parents moved back home to Louisville. So I started out either K-5 kindergarten or first grade in Mississippi at Winston Academy. So I'm not whole life, but might as well be.
Might as well be.
But back to your question, just the state of Mississippi, if you zoom out and look at the whole state in its entirety, we have such a vast difference on the landscape when it comes to our natural resources. I mean, you can go to the southeast and be on the coast, or you can go to west central and be in the Mississippi River Delta, or you go to east central and be in kind of the Black Prairie, so to speak. I mean, it's just so diverse when it comes to our natural resources here in Mississippi, and it creates its own challenges with managing that on a broad scale.
Mm-hmm. So true. Because I've heard it and experienced it, the same thing. I go to the coast and sometimes you're like, am I still in Mississippi? It feels like such a different place versus last week I'm maybe in Clarksdale. And, from a management and a wildlife perspective, people like you and those others that work at MDWFP, you really have to be flexible and kind of diverse in your background and knowledge on things because of what you just said. Am I right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. In what was described as kind of a hybrid of, on the biology and wildlife side in this alligator program, at the same time as the badge, the gun, the law enforcement side of it, which is a part of your experience too. Since that's all under your hat, what is your day-to-day like? What's the day-to-day job kind of like for you?
Oh, it could range from anything. This time of year, I'm usually in the office about 2 days a week because we're currently accepting the private lands applications for private lands vouchers. So I spend a good deal of time making sure we get those out the door in a timely fashion, and I'll spend 1 to 2 days in the field this time of year. And of course, starting this week, we're going to start running alligator survey routes. So I'll be out late afternoon into the night running those routes. And I do get assistance from other Wildlife Bureau employees across the state to assist me with that because I can't run every one of them myself.
Sure.
That'd be impossible. I'd run myself ragged. Usually in the wintertime, I take care of all the admin stuff with the program and get out and doing law enforcement and help the guys in the field. And I try to focus my time on our state-owned assets since our county guys are so strapped, in the field with the county duties. So I try to focus on our, wildlife management areas or our state parks or whatever when it comes to law enforcement in the wintertime.
Those survey routes that you talk about, what does that kind of entail?
So we have on our public waters areas that we have survey routes that are in those public waters, and we have a starting point and a stopping point. So you'll count every alligator that you see that night from the boat. You don't venture off the route or anything, and you try your best to get a length estimate on each alligator too. So and over time, you have to look at it from not a microscope, but zoomed out, so you can somewhat kind of see the population trends in that area, whether they're swinging up on the curve or going down.
Yeah. Okay.
It's a good indicator over time.
Well, and it's obvious to even a novice to look, say, okay, yeah, you'd have to pull in some help.
Oh, yeah.
How many different and this may be a question for an estimate too, but how many different bodies of water is that going on in Mississippi this time of year?
I think there's somewhere between 18 and 22 survey routes.
And let's say a boat that's on a survey route, how many people? 1, 2?
Usually I try to take 2 extra people with me. So I got 2 spotters and me, and I've since updated our data capturing. I've had some of our IT gurus downstairs develop a application to assist us with those routes so that we're not having to write down a long GPS coordinate as we're going down the river. Now I can somebody can hold the phone and they can hit a button and it geotags that point and it gives a size class. That's one of the strides that I've made so far in this position is getting that application up and going, so we're not hand writing it down and we're actually capturing it in a mapping system as well.
Chip had a question about the new season in the Pelahatchie Bay area. How's that going?
So this was the second season for the Pelahatchie Bay hunts. It's a special hunt on a section of the reservoir where we have human wildlife interaction, and the population and the habitat there supports a strong population of alligators. And due to the complaints that we were getting from the residents who have built in alligator habitat or subdivisions going up in alligator habitat, the previous administration decided to use the public to help us reduce those breeding populations and bring them back down to help us cut out a lot of the complaints around that specific water body off the reservoir. And I will say that the past 2 years since that hunt has been going on, we have had the fewest complaints we've ever gotten on that specific water body. And it takes a lot to get that special hunt up and going, because not everybody realizes that that's Pearl River Valley Water Supply District authority. So I have to go before the board and ask permission to have that hunt. So with that comes, now you have to monitor the nest stuff every year, and you have to monitor what the population's doing on that specific water body, because there may come a point in time where we have to throttle back on that hunt, if we bring it down to numbers that can't sustain it.
Monitoring the nest.
Oh, yeah, I love doing that.
You love it?
Oh, yeah.
What's involved with that?
Well, you get out in the airboat and you go look for active nests and document them when you find them. And I usually dig them up and just kind of take a look at the eggs and what kind of shape they're in and cover them back up. But it's really a 2-person job, because those females, they can be, pretty aggressive when you messing with their nest. I've had one try to eat the airboat.
See, I knew you were being humble when I asked you earlier about close calls. And that's what I was talking about. You said one has tried to eat the airboat.
Oh, yeah. She wasn't happy I was there. So it's good to have somebody there with you to watch your back while you digging in the nest and looking at those eggs.
So the other person is a lookout.
Oh, yeah.
Kind of like a bad offensive lineman. Hey, look out.
Exactly.
Here
You're my blocker.
Here she comes. But you love it.
Oh, yeah. I really enjoy getting out on the airboat and being on the water.
Are you afraid of anything?
Not really.
I'm picking up on that.
No, I've always been a daredevil growing up. I'm an adrenaline junkie. It don't too much scare me. Okay. I had the privilege of putting 1,200 plus miles in a little Cessna airplane over the wintertime, helping the deer program and our partners with MSU out on a study. So I spent a lot of time in a little small fixed wing propped airplane.
In the wintertime?
Oh, yeah.
Get cold in there?
That wasn't bad.
Not too bad.
Your toes get numb after a while. But
kind of like a deer stand almost, A
little worse, because I do a lot of walking in the deer woods. If I get bored, I'll just slip around and do some still hunting, walking. But yeah, it does get kind of cool up there when it's below in the teens up there in the air.
Yeah. I could, as you make that comment, I can't help but kind of step back again 10,000 feet and think about you as a little one growing up in Louisville. And there may be others who are listening who are young that think, that might be something I want to do. It's an adventurous and at times adrenaline pumping career,
Oh, yeah.
isn't it?
No doubt.
And I would think the law enforcement side, it's the same way.
It was. I had some very interesting times in the law enforcement bureau too. Got to participate on search warrants and serving those search warrants and doing the legwork to get to that point and execute those. So it can be really stressful events and times, but you rely on your buddy beside you.
Last one for me. What purpose for you in this career, whichever department, whichever area what purpose do you find in it?
I just want to leave the resource better than the way we found it and be able to sustain it for the next generation. I've got 2 beautiful, awesome youngins. And I mean, one day, hopefully I'll have grand youngins. So I want them to be able to enjoy what we get to enjoy here in Mississippi with our natural resources. So I just want to be a part of that and extending that to generations to come.
It's really interesting to kind of hear you talk about, your career path. You mentioned all those brothers and sisters. Do they ever look at you and go, Andrew, alligators? Really? You ever get that from family members?
Oh, yeah. From my wife sometimes too.
Yeah, I'm sure. But it sure is great to talk to you here on the show and great to meet you. And again, just appreciate your time.
Oh, yeah. Anytime.
Thank you. That's Andrew Arnett. He is the program coordinator of the Alligator Program here at the Mississippi Department of Wildlife, Fisheries, and Parks. Thanks for listening to the Mississippi Outdoors Podcast, and we'll see you outdoors.